Well, welcome everyone. It is 10:05, so maybe we can get started with intros, and then anyone else that comes on will try and catch as well. All right. I'm Vanessa Richards, and I work for Stallion Government Services, and yeah, really excited to share together this very first time hybrid event with the webinars, and any feedback that you have on it would be great. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today. We can maybe start going around here online, and then we'll come back in person and then around to Michelle and Sue. So Christian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Good morning. My name is Christian Aaron Keel. A lot of you would know me from my prior role with the Papatla Council. I'm currently doing some contract work in and around Lillooet, doing some with the district of Lillooet right now. And I'm just joining out of curiosity's sake and want to learn more about, in particular, the nation's approach to, addressing the impacts of Bill 14 and 15. Thanks.
Oh, okay, yeah. Michelle's coming right back. Thanks, Christian. It wasn't you.
Yeah. She's out of here.
Yeah. Also, too, I'll be doing a draw. I forgot again to mention. So I'll be putting your names into the draw, unless someone doesn't want to be in the draw. But you can let me know in the chat otherwise. And let's go on to James. No, Chelsea. You'd like to introduce yourself. Chelsea? He was just there a second ago. Just listening in today. Oh, okay.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just at work, and so I'm mostly listening in. But the internet isn't great as I'm moving around, so if I cut in and out, that's why. But yeah, I'm a concerned person living in the territory that is really curious about your guys' take on the fast tracking of these projects. So yeah, thanks for holding the meeting.
Thanks for joining, Chelsea. James Williams, would like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, James Williams. I'm the Chief and Counsel in Lillooet. Just curious and want to learn more. So just a lot of listening in, I think.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us. Karen. Karen? We can come back around to Joe. I just saw joined on. Joe?
Introductions, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, Joe Frank. I'm from Skatine. I've been on board now for, I don't know, seven years or something like that now, ever since the changeover. Just interested in seeing what you guys are all doing today.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining. Anisha. Work for a Hackle Community Forum Corporation, just here to listen.
No, it isn't.
Okay, wonderful. I'm glad you joined us. And Keely.
Hi, Keely We Whitney, Junior Wildlife and Lands Assistant, just here to listen and observe.
Wonderful. Thank you, Keely, for coming. And circling back around, if you would like to do an intro, Karen.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I am actually just going to listen in. I'm actually getting an oil change in my car right now, so I'm going to park somewhere else in about 10 minutes, but I'm going to keep listening.
Awesome. It's exciting.
Okay. And I'm from Naquatqua.
You're from Naquatqua. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the wonderful thing about virtual meetings. You can just have them anytime, anywhere. That makes me really happy to hear that. Thanks
Very
for joining.
convenient.
Yes.
Okay.
That's great. Okay, we're gonna start.
Badger's here too.
Oh, Miss
Badger.
Patrick? Oh,
Badger.
Badger and Lorinda. Okay, so Badger, would you like to do an intro? For Lorinda. Oh, Badger's coming on.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello. Sorry, I kind of called both of you at the same time. So, yeah, go ahead, Badger, go ahead since I called first.
Okay, well, I'm Badger Jack. I'm from Houston. I'm not in the area right now, so I'm just taking part from somewhere else.
That's wonderful. Yeah, someone else was just getting an oil change and listening at the same time. So it's great that we can hold these virtual events and everyone can have the opportunity to join. And Lorinda.
Hello, Lorinda. I'm actually joining from the road. I'm actually in Alberta on my way to Edmonton, actually. We have a meeting over there for some big things happening with our business. So we're just making our way to Edmonton. So yeah, owner and operator of Black Hills.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Badger and Lorinda and everyone online. So we're gonna just come to the here in the boardroom here, and maybe we'll start with Cheryl here, and we'll circle around, and then to Sue and Michelle.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. This is very exciting and awesome. My name is Cheryl Blair. I am a wildlife biologist and environmental specialist. I've been living and working in the Shoutname territory for about 20 years and have worked both at the community level and the nation level for the nation. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great.
Jessica Hewitt, working with the health department at Curtis Creek Band. Looking forward to learning more education as to what's going on with our lands, and hopefully put 2 cents in to move things forward.
That's awesome.
Joy, I'm from Curtis Creek, just here to learn more stuff about the land.
And I'm Sue Senger, and I'll be presenting with Michelle today. I'm currently the Lands Guardian coordinator for the nation, and I'm a professional biologist and grologist.
Thank you. Hey, and Michelle.
Morning, everybody. Michelle Edwards. I work with the Statliam Chiefs Council as the Tmicw coordinator. I'm a former chief of Shekelwash and Kikaitan community and have experienced a lot of ups and downs with infrastructure. You know, what goes with building it and opportunities, and try to look at it very holistically and in a rounded way, but always making sure that it's the land that comes first. And as a First Nations woman, that's where I'm always going to come from. Just want to welcome everybody. You know, we've got quite a diverse group. It's good to see that, you know, we've got some representation from the municipality, because of where Lillooet is situated. It's right on top of our history. And so when you look at fast tracking infrastructure in a municipality, that's going to be either a lot of impacts, a lot of hardship, a lot of heartbreak, or a better way to build relationships between our communities and the district of Lillooet. It's also good to see that we do have business represented here as well, because there has to be an understanding of how we move forward with these large infrastructure projects and making sure that, you know, the land is being looked after. And, you know, and I always say we'll be the ones who look after it the best, but that doesn't mean we go bulldoze through our history, right? So it's kind of a hard balance sometimes that we have to I guess agree on and be okay with ourselves moving forward. So the reason we've chosen to review Bill 14 and 15 was because we're still practicing the webinars, and it was something that was on the radar. So we thought, well, let's talk about it. Let's, for myself, I want to see what people know and how much they know. And can't be that much because they were just really introduced. They were introduced to be fast-tracked. And so I just want to go through a couple of slides. When it first came out, Leadership Council, who is the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, the BC Assembly of First Nations, and the First Summit, 3 different groups of chiefs really that represent almost the entirety of you know, what we call BC. And so they're always kind of the first ones to get wind of these things because they're sitting directly with the province for the most part. Sometimes advocating, sometimes supporting. The province obviously will look at them as, you know, that's their first line of consultation, where we have to continuously remind these organizations that they are not the title and rights holders. And they have to say it constantly, but they do have funding to do research. They've got a lot of policy analysts. They've got lawyers who can do some of the work for us. And that's where we really appreciate where those entities come in, because they'll do some of the legwork for us. I did have a slide, and it's the PowerPoint, and just gonna ask Vanessa to put that up. Yeah, that's the one. And so the slide that I'm going through, it's only 5 slides, and it just gives you, you know, just kind of what Bill 14 are and what Bill 15 are, and how we had to be involved. And then I'm going to share a little bit of a letter that the Tmicw Chiefs Council had sent in, you know, to Premier David Eby. And I believe probably most of the nations and or communities across the province actually would have sent them as well. You know, because we have to understand what these projects do when they fast track. And I think a lot of us have seen it, we've experienced it, we're experiencing it today. You know, we'll go through a project that we've been dealing with for, Christ, I'll say 70 years. But really just, you know, in the last few years, you know, some of the upgrades that are going on and what we're trying to do to get people to listen. And sometimes it's a struggle to do that. So this first slide is Bill 14 as Renewable Energy Projects Streamlined Permitting Act. And Bill 15 is the Infrastructure Project Act. And it's a First Nations Leadership Council, the 3 entities that are named there, their review and commentary. And so, again, when this was first introduced, you know, this Leadership Council had held several meetings, called them emergency meetings, made sure that all the chiefs were in attendance. I believe they were actually just going for the first reading, if not the second reading, to legislate this. And so they had some of the, I think the AFN chief, can't recall what her name is now, but they were going to speak against this and what it was going to do to us. So the opening comment, so BC and Canada overly rely on natural resources and energy development. And that's a very true statement. I think in the Statland, we've witnessed that with forestry in the past, I don't know, like 100 years, that they took too much. They overcompensated. They took everything, you know, and you get financial institutions come in, they finance all this work. Oh, we've got to do it. They go in, they get loans, they go and take the resources. And when they run out, they actually get subsidized. The province will come in and subsidize those forest license holders because, you know, they start talking about what they lost. And that's what I talk about, what we lose, right? And how do we put a value on what we lose out on the land? How do we go in and we start telling people these are actual losses? We don't need to be putting, you know, monetary value on it. We're putting what we're actually losing, a way of life, you know, teachings, customs, protocols, language. Those are things that we're losing that we actually don't know how to put a value on there.
Food security and
Food security.
7 generations.
Yeah, 7 generations, you know, and Dr. Sue, I've been working with her, you know, I'll say it probably over 30 years.
It's 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years. And, you know, and I really appreciate what she brings because she's had a lot of years to work with us and really understand what we're talking about when we talk about our losses. So trade war places BC's financial forecast in dire straits. That's not our problem. But we're put in a situation where we have to deal with it. We're put in situations that we have to actually defend ourselves and our territories. And, you know, when I first heard about the tariffs on the forest industry, I was okay with that because to me, it meant our forests get to stand while people fight over, you know, how broke they're going to be by not being able to bring wood in. And it doesn't mean I'm, you know, I'm ignorant to the fact that a lot of our people work in the mills. They have to understand that it's the forest industry that has gone in and taken it. And, you know, they talk about, you know, planting. Well, it's going to take 200 to 300 years for those trees to grow back. So we're not going to see another forest industry here, you know, for a couple hundred more years, right? And that's just how it is, right? They talk about going around spraying pesticides or herbicides so the trees will grow quicker. That's just ridiculous. We're never going to see that growth. Like, so they go out there and that tells you how desperate they are that they actually have to go in and find a spray to make trees grow quicker. And that's a sign of desperation. The province's political answer is to accelerate economic development by removing project barriers, especially First Nations reconciliation. And it's funny that they, you know, they talk about us like we're, you know, a project barrier, right? Where, you know, we're not somebody who actually knows about the land, cares about the land, can help them even in developing the land. We're a project barrier. And I've heard it. You know, I've argued with people. Could argue all day with people who want to come through, and it takes a lot for us to try to get people to understand why we don't want some development to go through so quickly. And for a couple of hundred years, we actually haven't had a say. It's just been done.
And what's interesting about this, especially First Nations reconciliation, is that we only just got DRIPA passed in the province. So we're only talking, what, 5 years, not even, of the province trying to do reconciliation. And it's the first thing to go under the bus.
Yeah.
So that's not very promising from the perspective of nations trying to take care of their resources.
Yeah. And it goes to the fact for some of these webinars is to really inform the Statlian people, because when decisions are made that impact our future and, you know, the next 7 generations, then those voices have to come forward, because those are the voices that need to be heard. And I think we need to find, you know, better ways of engaging. How do we get everybody to understand the things that are going to move forward, things that aren't moving forward, things that are, you know, being thought about, you know, where you need more information, you know, because I feel that the more informed you are, the better decision that you can make, and should never be making a decision when you're not informed about the future of the decision you're making. Currently, core consultation participatory mechanisms is through environmental assessment, regulatory permitting, and limited G2Gs. G2Gs are government to government. And again, where it says core consultation, You know, when you look at government to government, that's all leadership sitting around, you know, talking about getting informed. You know, it's always a give and take because the province is going to come from, we're looking at economic certainty and we're looking at our own certainty. And so how do you make those two things work together? Oh, what's going on over there?
Oh, sorry. No, I just can't move the camera.
Oh, okay.
So Sue, if you're talking, if you could turn your camera on, then
sure.
we can see.
I can do that.
My remote seems to not be
Batteries,
working.
probably.
Yeah, maybe that's what
It's probably batteries.
Okay. Well, anyway, continue.
So Bill 14 and 15 are designed in part to cut the First Nations. I'm surprised I didn't say F and red tape. I just knew that. Usually I'll say that F and red tape. Yeah, with overreaching powers to exempt any deemed renewable or infrastructure project from the environmental assessment and permitting process. And you know, I think that's why it's really important that we're having this discussion. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining to become informed, to really get educated on what is going on out there, and you know, some of these big projects that are being moved through. And you know, we've got big projects here, and we'll be touching on them after this presentation. The result may trigger unprecedented breaches of the duty to consult, conflict, and have the effect of a repealing of UNDRIP legislation. And it's funny that they would move forward with these, knowing that they're probably going to get taken to court again. And from what I know of the province and, you know, the financiers, they're all broke out there. They have no money. They can't pay for this, all this work that they're doing. So we're going to have to pay ourselves for all of this, right? It's just a really hard thing to follow when you have, you know, unprecedented breaches of the duty to consult. And we all need to actually be taking into account those words, because that is what the legal advisors to the First Nations Leadership Council have advised them. Next slide. So Bill 14, what that is, so renewables. So Bill 14 would create a new designation of streamlined projects, exempting them from the environmental assessment. The selected wind energy projects, the North Coast Transmission Line project, including upgrades and prescribed renewable energy projects. If deemed a streamlined project, BCER, or the sole regulator, or kind of like the BCUC. So they're level 1, BCER is the sole authority. Level 2, exempt from Energy Resource Activities Act, permitting and key environmental regulations under Wildlife Act, Water Sustainability Act, and the FERPA, which is the
Forest and Range Practices Act.
Forest and Range Practices Act. And level 3, exempt from obligations applying to dormant and orphan sites. Like, even to call them orphan sites, I mean, I don't know who these people are. Bill would provide cabinet with unfettered power to deem projects as renewable energy, streamlined a resource as renewable, and wind energy project to exempt from an environmental assessment. The bill would allow BC energy regulators to have a delegated authority under the Heritage Conservation Act and Agricultural Land Commission. And that won the Heritage Conservation Act, and I talk about it quite often. Our history has to be told. Each watershed has a story. Each watershed has a place name. Each watershed has traditional uses. They have trails. That is where our history is, out on the land. And so when you have a Heritage Act coming in and trying to overrule that, that's our first line of defense, is making sure that our story is told. And when you have somebody go out and just do work and they don't stop to actually document the story, hear the story, or understand the story, it's lost. And so we have to do what we can to make sure that culture and heritage overviews are done. We should actually be doing them now, you know, even for future development. If they were done now, you're kind of coming in, you go, okay, we want to do this and, you know, back in this watershed, and we'd go and look at the culture and heritage overview. Say, well, no, you can't, because the story that we have out there is too important. The history that is actually still on the land is too important. It's not up to us to erase that history or remove the history. And I've said it quite often that if we remove the physical artifacts from the land, someday our history is going to be extinct. Who we are will be extinct because the future generations won't be able to see that history. They won't be able to go out there and see the story that is being talked about, that they're, you know, that the stories have been passed on. So that's really concerning, that the Heritage Conservation Act is something that they would have delegated authority, and they're going around, they're trying to, you know, revamp it. It can't be. It has to be just led by us. No province should touch our history.
And I think the challenge with this is, so essentially what they're saying is they've streamlined it, which means now they don't have to do any of this work. They don't have to do the cultural work or the environmental work.
Yeah.
And so that's really concerning when you think about what that means on the land. So if that's your community's hunting ground and they say, oh, this is a streamlined project, well, too bad, right? They're just going to move ahead. Doesn't matter if that's critical habitat for mule deer or fish. It's just going to go ahead. And so these are the challenges. It just overwrites everything else except economics. And when was the last time that happened? Well, BC Hydro, that's why the BC Hydro settlement agreement, they wiped out a salmon population. That's exactly the same thing that was happening 100 years ago. And now we're going back there. We're going back to this idea that you can just override these values. So it's very concerning.
We have two hands up.
What's EA?
Environmental assessment.
And what do they, because it says accept, I'm accepting them from EA, and then down the bottom there, it's got, I just had them a couple of times there, so environmental assessment.
Oh, that's why they're saying they're fast track, because they want to avoid all of those things just so they can go forward and just build. It's those environmental assessments that puts all conditions, and I mean, Dr. Sue and even Cheryl can, you know, really talk about the role that they play.
So who are they? Like, is that government?
It's a government process,
okay.
And it's the one that sort of ends up setting the regulations, right? So it says, you know, you can only work in these stream windows, or you have to avoid this habitat, or put a buffer on, or do these different things. That all comes out of an environmental assessment.
And who gave them permission to come onto our land and have say?
They just came in, right? This is the province, and like a lot of the infrastructure here was built when, you know, we were being threatened to be thrown in jail. They were taking our kids. They just came in and did these things.
So can we not do this to them now?
Well, we'd like to.
Okay. Thank you.
Just sort of related to how we asked for the environmental assessment, just on this slide, just FYI, there's the act that to be added is the Environmental Assessment Act. And so that really relates to them exempting from environmental assessment. So just FYI for the future, it's important to first outline the Environmental Assessment Act, because they're bypassing that one predominantly.
Yeah, we asked about that one in another situation on why it wasn't being done here. So Bill 15 is the Infrastructure Act. So intent to streamline approvals of major public and private infrastructure projects across BC, including hospitals, schools, transportation projects, including other development deemed provincially significant, and supporting economic growth such as critical mineral supply and replacement of US imports. And I think that's, you know, when you look at just that first, it's how these projects become, you know, major projects and the things that they need to do these things, and, you know, why, you know, because they'll come in and they're definitely like with the critical mineral supply. Well, that's for everybody. It's not just for, you know, the people in BC or people in Canada, literally going in and, you know, taking all these critical minerals to supply other countries. So, you know, so you have your phones and things things like that. You can see that. But I think for us, we really need to understand the trade system because we are traders. We come from a very sophisticated trade economy. And so I think for us to understand that, what we did, but we made sure that we always had the resources, that we had enough resources, that we were looking after the resources, not just going and take it all now mentality and then, you know, go find something else to use. And I find that's what you know, non-Indigenous investors, I guess, kind of look at, is they want it all. Wherever that mentality comes from, I don't know, because it doesn't come from us. BC Cabinet may designate any project an infrastructure project to expedite existing approvals without clear criteria or parameters. Again, who even does that? I mean, these are people that get voted in, and they're the ones that are actually, you know, the ones to say yes or no, without having clear parameters to these projects. And again, we have to be fully informed as decision makers. And if you're not, you know, do they just say, yeah, we'll just deal with these issues later? And sometimes these issues are going to be extreme impacts to the environment and to our way of life, to future generations, and even the people who, you know, the new BC residents, or I don't know if they're Canadian citizens or what their roles are, what their titles are, but they're impacted as well. BC Cabinet power to authorize expedited regulatory review through permitting prioritization processes, streamline the environmental assessments via the creation of regulatory certifications issued by qualified professionals instead of through the established environmental permitting process. And I think that's something that we all need to understand is qualified professionals. I know Cheryl is a qualified professional, Dr. Sue is a qualified professional. You just can't come in and, you know, just because you know you're a new RPF or something and sign stuff up. You have to be qualified to actually give the opinion, to be able to sign some of these documents. And I think we need to, as all of us in the Statliam, if people are coming in and you're in a community meeting and you have somebody like, you know, talking to you about a new project and they want to come through and they say, oh, we've got qualified professionals. Well, challenge them on who they are. There is a list. For myself, I'm even just getting a hold of the people who developed this act. I want to talk to them about qualifications and what we need to be seeing, so we have a checklist. Cheryl?
Yeah, just to give an example of a qualified professional, so registered professional biologist, which myself and Sue are. Even if a person is coming in and they have the RP bio, it's called an RP bio designation. Even if they have an RP bio, they still have to have the qualified is the key, because if they have to demonstrate so much experience and expertise over years to be able to handle projects, sign off on a project, whether it's wildlife or erosion and sedimentation or water quality, whatever it is. And if they don't have the qualifications, they're actually required by law under Professional Governance Act to be supervised by an RP bio who has the experience. So just because you have an RP bio doesn't automatically make you qualified, in that you're not automatically a qualified professional just by having an RP bio above your name. So that's a really important thing, because people are doing that. They're getting their RP bios and just saying they're qualified and they're really not. They need to be supervised by someone who is. So that's a really important note.
Yeah,
it is really, because I think it was when we were up in Dr. Sue years ago was giving a presentation on grizzly bear population displacement. And the biologist for, was it Tmicw?
It's the gold mine, yeah.
Yeah, for the gold mine, we're up giving a presentation. They looked like they were 12 years old. Right, so you know, again, they were trying to pass them off as the RP by, like the qualified professionals, but really they looked like they just got out of school, and you could tell they were really nervous. You know, their face was all red about them trying to get up and explain to a room full of Chilcotin and Statliam people that they knew what they were talking about. And
it's interesting you bring that up because it's exactly what I was thinking about when going back to the top there about critical minerals. The problem is that's a really vague thing. Like, what's a critical mineral? And I was reading BC environmental law, West Coast environmental law said that under this provision, Bill 15, the province could fast track gold mines. Well, gold's not a critical mineral. And yet, so if this was in place back when we were dealing with Tmicw, they could have fast tracked that mine. We would have lost. And as it was, that process went to a federal panel hearing, and Michelle and I went to that and presented this on statute values as they connected through to the Silcotin with the grizzly bear on why that mine was so devastating to the values of the First Nations. Under this program, none of that would have happened. None of it. It would be fast tracked. And all of those values would just be wiped out under the gold mine. And gold is not a critical mineral. It makes somebody rich. It has nothing like critical minerals are supposed to be like for batteries, for for infrastructure things. We need electricity. Gold is not one of those minerals. And yet under this provision, all the cabinet can say, oh, well, we want the jobs and make it happen. So that's a really big concern, is that these economic growth covers a big chunk of anything. They can literally declare anything under this to be significant.
We've got Keely here had a question.
So
Hi.
Cheryl.
Yeah, so what Cheryl said about the RP bio, where there's like a whole process, you have to have supervision and such, right? Will that be wiped out with the bill? Like,
do you mean wiped out RP bio requirements? Is that what you're asking?
yeah, like where they're supposed to be supervised and actually, you know, not just be placed into such a high position without any experience.
No, not as far as we're seeing. So it's important. We were legislated, Keely, as a professional under the Professional Governance Act. That started about 5 years ago, and it's become in 2025 in September. Actually, just recently, it grew teeth. The problem with this is that we are legally required as professional biologists to uphold the legislation. And when we sign off on things, we need to make sure that we are absolutely in line and compliance with legislation, because we're liable legally if we're signing off on something that we don't have professional designation, experience, and expertise for. So upcoming RP bios, like you know, the newer RP bios are still required under the College. Professional Governance Act is separate from Environmental Assessment Act and all of these things. We're required to uphold those things in our professional body. And it's very important. Like I'm sort of down the road of this right now, what this means for us, because the pressure is going to become increasing on the RP bios and other professionals under the Professional Governance Act to uphold and hold the government feet to the fire. But we're going to need to come together on this, because the college, we're legally, it's very complex. We're legally obligated under Professional Governance Act, but the College of Applied Biologists still does not have enough teeth to support the biologists that are getting these RP bios. So we're going to have to really start to band together and figure out as a professional community how we're going to deal with this and apply that pressure, because we are legally obligated. Like if you're you're not allowed to be fired or taken off a project in your job if you've refused to sign off on that. But we're seeing that within companies, and so the pressure needs to be on that Professional Governance Act in the college to move forward, and how, you know, not only we're protected, but upholding the environmental legislation as it exists. So it won't be wiped out. It's going to have to be a lot stronger so that we're also protected in this.
Stepping up one level from where Cheryl's at, the issue that arises from this, though, is we're being asked as biologists, for example, to sign off on a project, except they've bypassed all the environmental. We can't. We will be unable to sign off. And the government has said, well, we're just going to approve it anyway. So they're literally going to ignore professionals. That's the problem. Well, and that's true of the acts, right? The Wildlife Act, the forest range practice, all they're saying we can bypass all these acts to put this forward. That's why this is very concerning from a First Nations perspective.
And just so you know, it's actually illegal to not have our professional sign off on these things. So that needs to bear in mind too, you know, whether this will actually be able to happen, and to use every tool we can. Like, it can't be swept under the carpet that you actually need professionals to sign off on this. And we are legally obligated to do so to the best of our professional ability, which is not pushing projects through without environmental assessment.
We've got Christian's hand up too.
Yes, Christian.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my interpretation of that point as well, just for my own clarity. So it seems like really in particular the concern for that second point, having these certifications issued by qualified professionals. So it sounds like they're delegating down responsibilities out of the environmental assessment process. The environmental assessment process is, the details of it are legislated. Like, it had to be reviewed by elected legislators. But with this, it seems like what they're allowing them to do is, instead of the environmental assessment process, they can get a bunch of Sues and Cheryls together into a room and create some sort of certification that doesn't have to be approved through any sort of legislative process to expedite. I mean, we'd be lucky if the room was full of Sues and Cheryls, but likely it's just going to be a part. It's not really, when they say qualified professionals, right? It's like, you know, it's just going to be whoever has an RP bio designation. It doesn't matter if they have any sort of understanding of, you know, generic Indigenous values, or, you know, have specific work with, you know, any given nation. So, you know, they can get together into a room and come up with a process that they seem to think is sufficient, and just go with that, rather than having to go through the onerous process of updating legislation or creating new legislation. So that definitely seems concerning, because, like the conversation you just had, not only is it about, you know, whether or not the qualified professionals have the actual professional experience, but it's also about, you know, what else do they have in addition to professional experience, like experience working with nations or so on and so forth. So
100%, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Christian. I think it's an important note, and absolutely, Bill 14 and 15 won't change the fact. It doesn't change the fact that there are professional biologists and other professionals that are signing off on things without proper process. So those people do exist out there, where they're not all the Cheryl and Sues. I don't know if this will make that fact more into light, because those people that are pushing things through, you know, if they work for industry and their paycheck and that sort of thing, it's happening already, whether or not Bill 14 and 15 comes into effect. And that's part of our pushback on the Professional Governance Act, because it's actually illegal for them to do so. So whether or not 14 and 15 comes in and you know, they are, whatever industry is able to obtain those signatures, it's still illegal under the Professional Governance Act, and that really needs to be addressed alongside Bill 14 and 15.
So I guess we'll have to figure out, probably, well, it's great when you have, you know, biologists that work with the Statlian people and for the Statlian people, on what do we look for when we go through some of these processes, on who signed, and can we challenge the signature and be bringing those forward. I think, you know, when the government asks us about our laws, where our law says we want a qualified professional signature, right? Those are things that we need to be putting out there.
Yeah, we're down in a rabbit hole now, but there's a challenge, because they could be professionals working for BC Hydro, working for a company, and so they're serving their client, which is not the First Nation, right? Their client, a company, so it gets really, really tedious. But
so on the First Nation side, then, if they were, say, reviewing like the big project they want to put up north with the new transmission line, so should those nations kind of chip in for a qualified professional to review?
Yep, absolutely get an independent auditor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the good old chip in process.
Independent person serving the nation is exactly right.
And it's been done, independent auditors. It's even been done here.
Okay.
Our projects. I'll leave it at that.
And just going back to when we were talking about gold, and you know, always tell the Chilcotins, the only use we had for gold is we chucked it at the Chilcotins when they were coming over the mountain. Can't not say it. Well, because we never had a use for it, and you know, and I think as Statlian people, the more we started learning about our history, and one of the best ways is to actually go to an old village site, and especially out in Houston, and they've got a really good tour, and they talk to you about the house pits that they dig in, and they never find gold in our cash pits or house pits anywhere. Gold is not anything that we held close to us. It wasn't good enough for us to store it and keep it in any way. So just the closing comments from the presentation that we got from the Leadership Council. BC has said that the duty to consult will be honored, but removed environmental assessments and permitting processes where duty to consult is largely, or where duty to consult is largely carried out. Well, that's a lot of the things that we want consulted on, is the environmental assessment. What comes out of that, what we're asking, you know, the governments and industry to be really looking out for. So that right there is just dumb. Oh, somebody. No, good. Okay. BC has said that no project will proceed without First Nations consent, but neither bill provides any consent mechanism. No guarantee, and the only statutory consent enabling provision of Section 7 DRIPA has only resulted in 2 TALTAN agreements and respect of specific projects. And so when they talk about Section 7, so they have Section 6 and 7 agreements, and they're kind of government to government. Let's sit down and talk about, you know, what we're going to give away, what we're going to keep. And so the government funds those processes. And the TALTAN, it's good that they mentioned them, because their agreement was broke immediately. They had to challenge them and tell them how disappointed they were. And the TALTAN are quite progressive. You know, they've got a lot of mining operations going on out there, but when they said they were just going to come through and just start, you know, plowing forward, moving forward, and they said, no, you're stopping, you know, that's major, you know, hunting territory, that's food sovereignty, that's our culture, that's our history, and that's not what they agreed to. So the TALTAN, as strong as they are, were the first ones being challenged, and that tells you that the province feels that they have every law on their side to go through this. And I think it's those types of things where we have to really band together. We have to support each other. Like I was said, Premier Evie was on a call when we were going through some of these things, and they talk about, you know, that they're only going to be consulting with the people or the nation whose core traditional territory they're in. And I had to let him know that everything we do impacts our neighbors. Everything that we do will impact communities south of us. So who are we as nations to say yes to something, knowing we're going to be impacting maybe our neighbors' way of life and how they uphold and assert their jurisdiction to lands that, you know, they've you know, managed for years. So we're really put into positions as you know, especially as Indigenous communities, if they don't come in and consult with us, because we're impacting our neighbors.
The other thing with this is nowhere in that bullet say there's funding to participate. So, you know, how are communities and nations supposed to be able to participate? I mean, everybody already has a full slate of work to do. It's not like you're sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah. And
yet there's no provision in this to provide the money needed for communities and nations to consult.
Okay, and next, BC has said that every project has consent and equity participation, but study demonstrate that there is no unanimous consent for any project, and equity participation is not provided for all affected First Nations. And that was something that Dr. Sue was just talking about.
I mean, think about the pipeline project. right?
Yeah.
That's a disaster when it comes to this exact thing. Is there consent? No.
No.
Right? So it's it's very challenging.
Neither bill contains a binding requirement for consultation and cooperation with First Nations at the project designation or approval stage, nor does it include related consent-based or decision-making processes. And for us, I think here in the Statlium, I feel that we're quite organized if we had to implement like a decision-making process. We definitely have a lot of work. The thing that we need to strengthen up on is getting all of that work into kind of like a database, which Vanessa has been working on. So our intellectual property, which I feel that's what we have to call it, because it's in the Statlium territory, information we're collecting. So how do you house that in one area where the Statlium can, have access to it so you can respond to, these decision-making processes. Like we're almost, to that place that we could be that government, but there's still things that we have to get into place. And one of them is how our information is stored and how we use it to the best of our nation's ability. BC is effectively enabling itself and the BC Energy Regulator, forgot what BCER stood for, just making it up, to bypass environmental protections and exclude First Nations from decisions that directly affect their rights and their territories. And so that's the end of that slide. And that was just something that the Leadership Council, as soon as this came out, like I said, they got a hold of all the chiefs, called an emergency meeting. Majority of the chiefs actually did join this. I did call in, listened in on what was being said, the questions that were being asked, the worry, the concern. You hear from both sides, chiefs that are looking at, watching their territory, looking after their people. Then you've got economic chiefs who are looking at, prosperity, putting their people to work, opportunities, but also being mindful. And that's what at the end of the day, it's always about the land first. And they honestly feel if they are out on the land, they're the ones doing the work, that we look after it a little bit better. And that can be true in some cases, but a lot of the time, environmental monitoring is probably, the one career that if you're on site, nobody likes you. They all think you're there to hinder what they're going to do. You get in the way of, moving forward. And I think that perception just has to be changed, that no, we're not there to hinder progress. We're just there to make sure that we have, a way of life for generations to come, that there's value seen in everything, not just the resource that you're extracting or that you're delivering or that you're moving across the territory. So we have to actually change how that can look. And so that's those slides. I don't know if anybody wants, has anything that they would like to talk about that. Because I found that sometimes I just talk too much and never leave an opportunity for anybody else to to say anything. And if not, we'll just keep going. And if it's better that people just ask questions as we're going along, as you think of them, then we can do that. I'm not sure. Did I send you the Statlium Chiefs Council letter?
Yeah, right
okay.
Here.
So I just wanted to show you a bit of the response that we sent in shortly after the message was sent out by the government that they were looking at these two new bills. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but they were like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. They were just out there like, oh, we're introducing them, we're passing them. And they just went and passed them. And so nobody really had any time to respond. And you can even recall, even some of the municipalities were pushing back on it because they didn't understand what it meant. And then, and that just tells you that it just happened too quickly. And so June 19th, you know, we sent a letter to Premier Evie, same as probably all nations across the province or communities. Some communities, I guess they're not really represented by their nation, where the Statliam Chiefs Council are the 11 communities within the nation looking at upholding our title and rights. And so it says here, we write to you directly, register our opposition to Bill 14, the Renewable Energy Project, streamline permitting, and Bill 15. And to express our serious alarm and concerns regarding your government's backtracking on its reconciliation efforts, specifically its commitment to substantive implementation of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. You know, as drafted, Bills 14 and 15 are deeply flawed. Bill 14 would see certain projects exempted from key provincial permitting and environmental oversight legislation and grant expanded and unilateral authority to the BC Energy Regulator to make complex decisions with minimal oversight. Despite this, Bill 14 contains no framework for First Nations decision-making or participation in the decision-making and places no obligation on your government to obtain the free, prior, and informed consent of the affected First Nations. There is no consistency with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Bill 15 goes well beyond expediting the approval and development of schools and hospitals. It is apparent that Bill 15 could be used to fast-track major extractive projects that has the potential to greatly impact our inherent and Aboriginal rights, title, and jurisdiction. We're not comforted by your government's commitment to consult First Nations on the development of related regulations after Bill 15 has already been unilaterally developed and passed. That is wholly inadequate and inconsistent with the Declaration Act. You have to follow your own law. The Declaration Act is clear. Your government must take all measures necessary to ensure the laws of British Columbia are consistent with the UN Declaration in consultation and cooperation with First Nations. By shirking your obligations under the Declaration Act and circumventing related processes and guidance set out in your own interim approach on the alignment of laws, your government has all but ensured that if passed, Bill 14 and 15 will undermine our inherent and Aboriginal rights, title, and jurisdiction. Consequently, our confidence in your government's ability to deliver on its commitment to reconciliation is eroding. Probably would have used a stronger word. Eroding, eroding is okay. Bill 14 and 15 must be pulled back, and time must be given to implement the interim approach. That is, to take necessary measures of consultation and cooperation to address the concerns of First Nations around the province. While conceptually we support taking appropriate action to counter outside threats to our collective economic well-being, such efforts must be done in partnership and not come at the expense of the basic human rights of First Nations or sidestep your related obligations to us. And so we did make sure that we got on record, you know, with the Premier, letting them know that we don't agree with this process. And as I was saying earlier, in the Statliam, you know, there's been so many resources already extracted from the Statliam. Really, the Lower Mainland was probably built on the resources that came from our territory. And that says a lot, the value, the economic value of the resources that were taken out of our territory when it's actually built up whole cities. You know, it's enabled, you know, companies to grow and has, you know, their wealth and prosperity. The financial institutions have made a lot of money, again, from the resources that have been taken from our territory. And, you know, and it's still being done. You know, when you look at projects, right now we don't have, you know, a big shiny new project like what they're talking about where, you know, they've got, well, they've got a new transmission line that they want to build up in the northern part of the territory, which then would power up an, I think it's a LNG like shipyard or something like that. Something like that. That's what they want to use to build up north. We're here, we're still dealing with BC Hydro. You know, and Dr. Sue has a little bit of a presentation and the things that we have to look for, even though we're not dealing with a new project. And again, it goes back to that Environmental Assessment Act. They came up with new criteria, and I apologize for not printing out what that new criteria was, but doing upgrades to aging infrastructure doesn't qualify under the Environmental Assessment Act, or to have a new environmental assessment done to it. So what we're doing is an ESER, which is an economic, social something, environmental review. Yeah, economic, social, environmental review. And it's a very watered down version of the Environmental Assessment Act. And so what they're doing here, and they, you know, it's been planned since, I'm going to say, I think the first time that it was ever mentioned, and only once during the hydro negotiations, was that LaJoy would need to be upgraded at some point. I think it was mentioned in some minutes in 1996, and then never really mentioned again until 2014, when it was the drawdown. It was called the drawdown, and communities were getting feedback on the drawdown then. But what they're doing, and I think it was 2014 or 2016, when did Mount Poly happen? 2014 or 2016? Shortly after the Chilcotin decision. Right, and then, you know, they did all these reviews, and anybody with a dam was told that they had to upgrade it for safety reasons in case we had an earthquake. And so they're upgrading LaJoy. And what that does, it does a lot. And we're trying to actually keep up with all the changes that are going to be happening, all the works that are happening. Again, we've got, you know, a great group of people that are working for the Statlian people, for the land and for the animals. And we run into a lot of pushback. Again, to them, they think it's a cost. And to us, they should have to pay for anything that we're going to lose. I'd almost say, you know, match it dollar for dollar. You want to spend $2 billion upgrading the dam, then you can reimburse our nation $2 billion so that we can actually revive our way of life and at least have something there to bring it back. But I'll let Dr. Sue just show you, and we're going to show you, I don't know if you've got the dam in there. If anybody knows where LaJoy is, it's the top reservoir. So it's up in Goldbridge. If you ever go out in Goldbridge and you see this big dam, well, behind it is LaJoy Reservoir. It used to be the Bridge River, and they dammed it years ago. And then they built it up, I think in the early 70s. And so it was at a certain, it was like maybe 700 meters. They built it up to 750. So where they built it up, that's the cause for the safety concern that if there was ever an earthquake, it could collapse, and then all the water comes down. Sometimes, like, well, let's just do it. I'd rather blow it up. You know, water's water. You know, it'll go somewhere and everything will get back to normal. But Dr. Sue will explain a little bit about some of the issues that we're facing out there.
So this is the LaJoy Dam here that Michelle's talking about. So that's Downton Lake that's impounded above that dam. And LaJoy is the dam that they're trying to fix to make it safe for earthquakes. And so we just want to jump into a really specific example of what we're dealing with. So as Michelle mentioned, there's a whole team, technical team of people, includes folks from communities at nation level and myself and various experts who've been brought in. And we're always reviewing the process. And part of what has to happen to make this upgrade is they have to have a camp somewhere. And the camp, we keep getting, it started out as 200 people. It could be as big as 500 people. Now we're sort of saying 350. Like, so imagine this moving scale of, we don't know how big this thing is. There was 7 places to review for camps locations, and most of them we said no to. And we were in this process, right? We're following a process. Well, one day I hear that BC Hydro is having a public meeting in Goldbridge, and that little red square on the map suddenly shows up on the map as a campsite. It never came to our table for review. They didn't ask for our opinion, nothing. It goes out to the public from BC Hydro as this is our leading campsite option. And I lit my hair on fire. Literally that day, I am on, because I find out through a great, like if I hadn't have looked at the public consultation, I never would have known. And I'm on the committee. I was mad as a hatter. And so this little red square, so what we're looking at on this map, so you've got the Downton Reservoir, those vertically hashed lines are mule deer winter range. So mule deer have to have old fir forests to survive. And you can see that falls squarely inside mule deer winter range. And the big orange blob up in the corner, that's the edge of the Downton wildfire. So that burned down in 2023. And so right away, and look at the position, you've got the lakes, you've got the wildfire and the reservoir, and you want to put 300 some odd people right in that little piece of remaining habitat. It's disastrous. Just looking at one value, just looking at mule deer winter range, this is a disastrous idea. Then you add in moose. So when I add my moose layer on, moose need all of this habitat, including the corridor right along the lake. Now you see it's even a bigger problem. And the camp is going to run all year round, and the moose and the deer and elk need the habitat in the winter time. And you're going to have 300 people in the winter time traipsing around in the one piece of habitat left in that little corridor. This is really the problem we have. And again, why is this coming up? It never came to us for consideration. Somebody looked at the map and said, oh, there's a good spot. And it's going forward. And that is exactly the premise of this Bill C-14 and 15. Now we can just say, oh, hey, that's a good spot. And there will be no consultation. We're already dealing with some level of that now. So this is just a snippet of a map, but essentially this is part of the traditional migration corridors that have been brought forward. And you see that area goes right across all where this work is going to happen. I didn't design this. Oh, hang on, I got to go this way. Sorry, so this is zooming way out. Again, the little red mark is that campsite we're talking about. The striped lines are mule deer winter range. The beige colors moose. The big orange, that's the 2023 fire for Downton. And the rose colored one off to the right is the 2009 Pearson fire. So now when you zoom out, you also see the problem. You've got a campsite going in the one little green patch of timber remaining, and all of the ungulate movement, all of the pressure is on that piece of habitat. It's the one place. You couldn't pick a worse spot on the map pretty much to put a camp. Like you would, but why did it happen? Well, because they didn't look at environmental values. They were looking at economics. It's close to the dam. It's a clear cut. We can put a dam. We can put people there. So
I just have a question, because they said they just did a tabletop exercise, asked somebody to go and find some locations.
Yeah.
I think we should have been asked, right? And I think.
Oh, exactly. We weren't asked. That's the whole point.
And we should ask who it was so we can follow up with them and actually educate them on what they need to be looking for.
So just a second. So this is what it looks like on the ground. Darwin and I went out onto the site. And so, you know, to prove my point, look at all the big trees in the background. This is exactly where you don't want to put a camp. If you look at an adjacent, like just up the road from there, you've got 2 and 3 foot high husham bushes everywhere you can see. The whole area is full of currently producing husham bushes, which is not something we have a lot of based on those big, huge fires. This is a current place that people go to harvest food and medicine. And Darwin and I found lots of examples of culturally important areas when we were out there. And then from a deer and moose perspective, this is exactly what we have left, right? We've got this multi-story forest that's got lots of food and lots of cover, which is what they need for the winter time. And currently this is one of the lower roads. So between that site and the reservoir, this is one of the lower roads. But again, and the whole area, every few meters you go, there's another trail and another trail and another trail, and we're finding deer scat and moose scat and evidence of current use. So Darwin and I've been to a lot of places in the territory, and we have rarely seen a place with so much biodiversity of plants.
Yeah.
Every imaginable berry and tree seem to be on this particular piece of land. So it's an example of, you know, what happens when people from the outside say, here's a good location, and they don't consider the values that First Nations have for the area. So it's really problematic then to say the province can just go and fast track the province with a project without talking to the First Nations and what's important to them on the ground.
Yes. I was just going to say I have quite a bit of data on that area because 2022, for those that don't know, I environmentally managed the first round of the drawdown. So it had 5 days to get this thing on the ground. I'm not going to go into the chaos that was the first time around. One of the things I had to do at the end of March, because it was so snowed in and iced in, I had to find access down to Downton Lake to get crews down there. I've been all over this area. I've got a lot of data about that area. If you wanted to approach, some of that is in the comprehensive report that we put out. So I already have the preliminary data of wildlife and the land out there. So I'm hoping that will be used, because that was a lot of effort to get that, and we have it at our fingertips for the shout-in. That is a very heavily disturbed area, I will say. There's quad trails, ATV trails, everything through there. So you know, wherever you go, quite frankly, with the camp locations, you're going to be disturbing. So I also don't want to sort of give the message that the other camp locations aren't equally as heavily, you know, disturbing the landscape.
And we've got a different one that's not on the north. That's
yeah, I know. So one of the most important things is, I think, is to you have to do an assessment first, a camp assessment, before you can even put it forward. And BC Hydro needs to hear that. So for the big bar slide, when I managed that one, the camp that went in, every single place that was suggested, we did a full camp environmental impact assessment before it was even considered for a thing. And that needs to be pushed, like BC Hydro needs to be pushed back in that way, that a team should be assessing these with all that's pre-prior and informed consent. You have to have soil, and you have to have erosion control, sedimentation control. Where's your water coming from? Wildlife. Is this a red listed ecosystem zone? Is it whatever else? So you need to have a team that should be providing all of that data about the impacts of this camp. They can't actually just say that, you know, this is the location without providing that data first, and it's up to them to actually pay for that assessment. So I can send you a copy of the Big Bar camp assessment, Michelle, and show you what that entailed.
Yeah, no, that would be good, because that you know, I don't know if that's our environment teams on there.
Yeah,
and I'm hoping they are, because, and this is what it goes to, is that if these are things that are supposed to be done, we're getting information kind of after the fact. But Hydro, when we were out doing the field visit for LaJoy the first time, and I was asking them how they were getting this information and how are they collecting, they went right to the Hydro agreement that they only have to give a 2-week notification process. And we need to push back on that. And I've said it a few times, we need to look at that agreement and take that out, because that was something that we released them on. And it's very important that we understand these releases fully. And, you know, I apologize that I didn't actually look at that even more. I never thought that Hydro would come in and start fast tracking these things, but they're using that 2-week notification that they're just sending out, and that's their consultation process. And we have to push back on that, because this camp, if they would have asked me or even shown me the first day, I would have said no.
It would never have made it past the first round.
Our culture and heritage is below the surface. I was out there, you know, physically digging holes, probably in early 2000s, finding our history, not at one layer, but at 2 layers. And that shows you the consistent use of that site. And the reason that it's probably so plentiful is because we're always using it was a trail. Again, the stories that are out there, that if you go and develop, we lose it. We lose those stories.
And Houston, their heritage, not at that location, not at that camp, but further over to the east of there, we're doing digs, looking because of a salvage logging block, and they were finding artifacts below the ash out there.
Yeah.
So we're talking thousands of years old. So the point is that had this come through the process, it never would have gone to the public. And that's the part I think that angers me more than anything is we have a process in place. It should have come through the process. But willy-nilly, suddenly it's out there for the public to make, you know, provide comment on, and the actual technical team hasn't provided comment because we would have killed it off the top.
Yeah.
We said from the beginning, nothing on the north side where those fires are. You can see the scale of the fires. It's not hard. I showed you on the map. It's not hard to see the scale of that impact on ungulates, on deer, especially, which are as important to the Statlium as salmon. When salmon are low, people hunt deer. We need them.
Yeah.
And they've been massively impacted by those fires.
Yeah.
So you can't put a camp on that. You put a camp on the south side above the dam somewhere, great.
Yeah.
Don't put it where we're trying and actively working to recover habitats for wildlife impacted by fire.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, those communications like need to be had. It's like always such a big process, but again, like they're trying to avoid having to go through this process. Wow, that's a lot.
Well, this one, especially because it's so costly, I think they're having a hard time selling it even to their board that, you know, they need it. They can do it, but I think the board's saying you can't spend as much money as you want. And, you know, when you go and ask for, you know, $2 billion, I think the ratepayers need to know what the impacts are that are going to come with it. You might get a dam that's built up, that's refaced, they recoat the concrete, they're going to build a new intake, couple new big tunnels. But this project is going to be detrimental. And we have to figure out how we reduce a lot of those impacts.
Well, and if anything, the process is working. When we started this a few years ago, 2021, I think, when I started with the technical team on this, the proposals that BC Hydro were putting forward were going to require many years of drawdown. The drawdown is the worst environmental impacts on everything: fish, water, wildlife, everything is really affected. When you imagine draining that reservoir, that's what a drawdown, drain the reservoir, that has huge impacts for everything. And when we started this, BC Hydro was saying 8, 10 years of, and we're like, yeah, no, that can't happen. And because of that pushback, and I think only because of the pushback, BC Hydro went back and started redesigning and trying again. And the new proposals are now more like 2 years, non-consecutive drawdowns, because also how many years in a row you draw down affects things. So the fact that we were able to get them to think in a different way, it took a long time, but the fact that we were able to get them to think in a different way and come back with new proposals, to me, is a testament that this process is helping protect Statlium values. Now, if you take that away, you'd be stuck with whatever the first, we can do it for this price in this design, and it just goes through the gate without any modification. That's the danger of Bill C-14 and 15. Is that you just don't get the same opportunity to say that doesn't meet our interest long-term. It doesn't actually even meet the province's interest long-term, because why would the province want to destroy these values?
Right. Yeah.
Christian?
Yeah, I just has it come up? So when we were looking at Bill 14 and 15, is it, I wonder if there has been a legal opinion, or if a legal opinion is required as to whether or not, if let's say that something related to the BC Hydro capital upgrades was included as a project under Bill 14 or 15, would that override the hydro agreement? Or in what ways could it override the hydro agreement? Because that seems to be one of the concerns we're discussing right now, right? I just wonder about that.
That's a good question.
I think, yeah, it was asked of Nick, and I don't have what he said with me right now, but we do have to look at that hydro agreement and make sure that it is followed, that they can't come in and just change it, because even with the new facility, you know, that should be an entire new agreement with new wording and learn from what we didn't put into the current agreement, because the new facility process is a new determination. And, you know, they'll even push back on that they're not generating any new power or anything, not diverting any more water. And we did look at that, but the hydro agreement that we did sign has to be looked at in this context. I believe the lawyers that we work with have gave like a very quick opinion of it, but they need to really look into it because again, hydro will follow it at times. And again, the notification, 2-week notification period is something that they like. I don't know what we were thinking when we agreed to a 2-week notification period. I think we were really thinking that we were going to be in a real working relationship that was actually meaningful, following spirit and intent of the agreement. But we did find out quickly that that was not the case. And again, very disappointing. Like a lot of us, you know, put a lot of effort into that agreement, thinking that we're making a change. And, you know, when it's not followed, it's disappointing, because we put a lot of time and effort into those. A lot of time was taken away. You know, our chiefs definitely, you know, we kind of missed them for 25 years while they were negotiating an agreement. But that is something that needs to be reviewed, because even though these projects that right now, especially the Joy, and it is they call it Little Site C, it is a $2 billion upgrade, right? And if it's Site C, it'll be a $4 billion upgrade. It doesn't follow under these two new acts, but the upgrades that we're going to be doing are going to be delivering probably more, I guess, deliverable power to other larger projects. And BC Hydro is going to be rebuilding a line. I think it's Prince Rupert, which really isn't that far away. I mean, it's still on one of our grease trails. Right? And so we have to look at these things. But this one, there's a reason that I think we're always ahead of the game, is because of the work that we've had to do in the last, since, well, really the 2000s, the relationships that we have been creating, you know, the people that we've had working with us, because they do rely on a lot of science. But, you know, we're very fortunate here that the biologists that we've worked with are also learning about our culture and our tradition, the things that we can pass on that adds value to, I think, the work that they're doing. You can't actually study anything in the Statlium without our knowledge, you know, because then you understand the science behind their research. And so getting this out there on, because really Bill C-15 and 14 are about what are our contributions? What is how are we going to be impacted by these? And we need to be able to tell the story in these watersheds. And if we can't, we're saying goodbye to our history. And so we have to be very mindful to always be telling industry and government proponents that it's our story that matters first.
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple of different comments. Is that okay? I can't stop if I'm taking too much time. So the kind of the overarching comment, and thanks for that, Christian, that kind of dovetails into another thing that I was going to wanted to bring up during this discussion if time. But first and foremost, you kind of hit the nail on the head with Bill 14 and 15. I think that's very much about UNDRIP, DRIPA, EPIC, title and rights, consultation, all of it. I just want to outline the importance, and it's a conversation, I think, you know, an ongoing conversation for another time outside of Bill 14 and 15, even if whether it's passed through or not. It remains that environmental legislation, Wildlife Act, the Environmental Assessment Act, etc., those are very weak in themselves. So without 14 and 15, there isn't a lot for legislation that protects the land, the waters, the fish, the wildlife to begin with. So I kind of want to make that clear to everybody that 14, 15 is not the sole thing that's going to destroy the landscape. It's already happened. It's already happening. Yeah. And really the overarching thing is that there is no teeth behind any sort of environmental legislation. And that's where conversations around title comes in. Or Chatelaine, you know, doing their own EA like the Squamish did or whatever, is because that legislation that's existing doesn't actually protect anyone that's out there. And you saw that firsthand in 2022. I mean, I witnessed it for 66 days on the ground, the impacts of firsthand, the impacts of that massive drawdown from LaJoy. The main concern, obviously, the Federal Fisheries Act has some teeth and fish were really focused on. Meanwhile, we were trying to do everything about terrestrial and semi-aquatics and water quality. And there were massive impacts around those areas, and there was no compensation, no follow-up for what was impacted, terrestrial, semi-aquatic, and water out there, because the legislation actually doesn't have teeth for anything else. And so that's a conversation for another time, because we're focused on 14, 15. 14, 15 really impacts First Nations and Indigenous peoples. It does not, the environmental legislation is so weak that it's not doing a good job in the first place, regardless if 14 and 15 is passed. So I want to really emphasize that. And then just quickly on the Squamish Nation, I brought this up to the SA last December. It's Squamish Nation. So when I was on the LTWIG and things like that for the LaJoy, I brought this up a couple of times, and I've never actually seen the evidence from BC Hydro that they actually went through and did a proper assessment for whether or not an environmental assessment, an EA, was actually triggered, because it's not just new facilities, it's existing with upgrades. If they meet the criteria, which this is a very large thing, it's possible that this meets the criteria for triggering an EA provincially. So there was that. So it's not that it had to go through the ESER, it's that BC Hydro said it didn't need to. So I would ask for the evidence for that. Secondly, the Squamish, the EA in itself provincially doesn't hold a lot of teeth either. So it's not the be all and end all. What the Squamish Nation did is they went to court and they fought in court for their own environmental assessment. And they have legal right to run an assessment, environmental assessments, and keep industry out if they don't meet the requirements. So now this dovetails into Christian's comment, because the Squamish are going into the legal consideration of whether 14, 15. So their EA operates alongside of provincial and federal legislation, but they are an equal power to those legislative bodies because of what they pursued legally, and they are legally they can uphold that. So they are now figuring out how 14, 15 may or may not impact that EA process that is theirs alone legally. So again, that comes back to, you know, I hope this conversation goes, what's our next steps? What can we do about this? And one of the things that, you know, we might want to look into, and again, and I've kind of been pushing that Squamish Nation thing for about almost a year now. I really think now more than ever that is something that perhaps the Chatelaine might want to look into as an option for overriding something that comes up, because Bill 14, 15 are now, but they're not going to be the last time as we move forward, especially as title gets more nations stand up and claim title and get, you know, stronger and stronger. This isn't going to be the only challenge that comes from the government to override First Nations voice. So anyways, thank you for that. I hope that was not too long-winded.
Christian, do you still have your hand up? Yep.
Yeah. I had one other question. Thanks for that, Cheryl. I think, like, one of the things I'm curious about is thinking strategically about Bill 14 and 15. You know, it seems like the province has been a bit, I don't really know why, but, like, you know, the federal government has its own equivalent to this legislation, which is Bill C5, right? Which is essentially the same idea. And they've put out, I don't know, I think like a dozen or so projects under Bill C5, and they just announced a second round like the other day. I'm not sure, Michelle, you mentioned that there's that transmission project up north as something but I'm not sure what other projects have been announced under Bill 14 and 15. But I'm wondering, from a strategy standpoint, is right now are we kind of, is the thought that we wait for projects to be announced under Bill 14 and 15 and then, look at those on an individual basis and address how they, their shortcomings when it comes to not addressing the duty to consult? I'm essentially wondering what's the alternative to that, rather than sitting and waiting for proposals to come under 14 and 15. What do we think, or what could be done strategically to challenge 14 and 15 on their premise alone, similar to what Cheryl's mentioning about how Squamish is approaching it?
Well, I think on that, and no, we shouldn't be waiting for projects to show up in a referral file. And so the one thing that I'm just reviewing is the BC Hydro's IRP. I don't know why I just forgot what the I is for. It's resource program.
Maybe it's idiotic.
Yeah, it's idiotic. So, but what it is, it's a call for power, and they're saying, so BC Hydro is looking to get another 5,000 gigawatts of power, and they're looking at solar and wind, maybe some run of the river. So I think in my review of that, it's just looking at, okay, so what are people coming to the Statlium for? What would they identify? And I've already gotten a few calls about people looking for power. And so I think here we just have to look at, well, what is our process if people want to come in and start talking about projects or even identify them? And again, I'm going to go back to, we really need our stories for out there, because people are going to come in and try to say that, yeah, you guys were never out there. There's no evidence of you being out there. And the first evidence is the story of the area that people want to go work in. And for a few years now, that opportunity has been missed. And I'll say that you should never go to a chance find procedure. It's just not anything that I would ever tell somebody, go and if you find something, then we'll work with it. If you tell the story of the area, then people know what they're looking for. They can identify when they're out there on the land what they're looking at, and it'll just help them in being able to finish telling that story. But we just need our process in place for anybody that's coming to see, because we'll always know. I mean, there's always somebody out there going, oh, I heard this, so-and-so about this area, working even with the district of Lillooet, what would they be looking at? And it's funny that Hydro calls their meetings the 10-year project update, or the 10-year Bridge River update, where ours is LaJoy. We're literally talking about rebuilding facilities. And so Hydro plays both sides very well. But we need our process developed for anything new that you have to come here first. And when we talk about laws, our laws is you stop here first and you ask us. It shouldn't, we just have to go and, they're so simple that if we go back into our teachings, people had to ask us permission. We asked permission to go hunting in somebody else's territory. People would call us and ask permission to come hunting in our territory. That's a law, that you ask permission to come into our territory to extract resources. What am I going to bring? What do I have to offer? That is an old law, probably one of the oldest, and every nation has it. That is a common law, and we should actually be putting it into, everybody should actually be doing it. You ask permission.
One of the things, and Christian will know this from his work with the Paitla Council, when I was working with the Paitla Council on land use planning issues, one of the things we worked toward was the shift in mindset around cultural values. So when you get a referral, communities are asked, the developer puts this is my development and we want to know your cultural values inside there. And that's a postage stamp point of view of culture. But so sure, you identify a camp that's there, and they want to just put a buffer around the camp and call it done. Well, the camp is there because the people were hunting or gathering on the whole hillside. the watershed itself was connected by trails to some other project. So one of the projects Papela Council did was a trails project, looking at how the landscape was connected. Another thing we did was, in this idea about how do you do cultural work, was to say it's 3 different spatial scales. It's the site specific, it's the watershed, and it's the whole landscape, right? So these are the important things. And it's that it's shifting, not the communities and nation point of view, that's how you've always done it, but it's shifting the relationship with developers, because the developer just wants to do the tiniest part, but that's not how you interpret what's going on in the land. So
Yeah.
And Badger has something to say.
Hello. Sorry, just trying to figure out how to use this. There's many things that have come to mind. I usually have a notebook and write them down so I can remember them all. But like one of the things that like immediately came up for me is how this is really impacting like how many peoples are trying to establish their own policies. Like we're being bombarded, we're being bullied. Like they're literally harassing us in the same way that industry does with proposals. And something else that I've been very vocal about the BC Hydro agreement. I understand a lot of people have put a lot of work into it, 20, 30 years. And also being very young and learning as much as I have and investing in learning as much as I have and feeling like there's very little impact, like in consideration to like my commitment to wanting to uphold things. Like I would have much rather like carried on the work in a better way, because there was like way too much certainty within that agreement. Like within that agreement, it speaks on like literally what's happening right now. Like we can't do anything to stop projects with BC Hydro without it, to a certain degree, without it being against the state or province. Like I read that agreement. So there's a lot of things that our people have voted yes on. So like in regards to everything that's being mentioned, like if they're not wanting to follow their own laws, then does that not put certain agreements in null? Like should we not be telling them like, oh, okay, like can we just like start reviewing everything? Like, cause like retrospectively, are they gonna do that to us now? Like, you know what I mean? It's just like what they're doing is opening this can of worms, and it's like, hey, that is definitely nothing truth and reconciliation about that, because there's so little truth. They only say what's appealing, mostly to investors, not us, who are connected to land since time immemorial and will be for a very long time. And that was something that I mentioned.
we lost your sound.
Oh,
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, we can hear you.
okay. I'm not too sure where I stopped, but that's something that I mentioned in like the hydro agreements, like in regards to like, informed like consultation or like consideration of LaJoy, like in regards to climate. Like we want, like after being a part of
I don't know if
the,
it's our internet or if
I
it's
don't
your
know if
internet,
it's ours
Badger.
or yours.
Yeah, it says our internet's unstable, so we apologize, Badger. You're on a good roll there. So try again.
I was just speaking on the impact of the LaJoy being a glacial runoff, and in regards to climate change and the continuous problem with dams and the way that the water is being dispersed. And so to keep like the natural runoff, like you can't mimic what mother is trying to tell the little smolts. Because I was a part of the sockeye smolt monitoring program, and temperature is a very big thing. So to act like we can control LaJoy Dam, glacial runoff, that we're not God, that's ridiculous. And I mentioned that several times of like not understanding like the need for LaJoy, and if we're producing more than enough power, like because before at this the time of the agreement, like there wasn't mention of all of these 5 gigawatts. Because currently those dams, like we only use like, what is it, a tenth or something like that of what those dams produce? And then the energy gets sold somewhere else. And to literally consider being a power to destruction somewhere else when we're also saying out the other side of our mouth that we don't want pipelines. I just would really like to see people in leadership be accountable to that, you know, because I understand it's an impossible position, and yet, like, at what cost do we sell our integrity? Because, like, for me, the whole powering down, whatchamacallit, of the dam, that is an opportunity to push that dam back and open up another corridor that's been broken. You know, the Terzaghi Dam. Like, to think of like opening up a corridor that's been severely broken to the point where people are barely dependent on deer anymore. Like, I don't know anybody in Schlatlam who's gotten a moose, an elk, you know, like I'm just like, I feel as what I feel is being viewed as somebody who is being advocated for. I feel like even as myself who's spoken up at meetings that there's still a lack thereof. You know, they want to shorten everything. And yet when we show up at these things, they're not, like, none of it's being considered, like you said, let alone to the like legit facts.
Yeah.
I feel like what Christian was mentioning about the like being proactive. Like, our people declare it every time that we pray. We are making, you know, we're proclaiming who we are. We're making declarations every time we pray. There's so many ways that we're doing certain things. And if they need proof of us, like, doing ceremony and giving offerings to every inch of our territory, I am down for that, for the protection of it, because, like, we, you know, respect our existence or expect our resistance. Like, either work with us or find somewhere else. And we know there's nowhere else. We know that. So thank you so much for this. I haven't been able to be a part of a meeting in such a long time. So thank you for giving me the space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right on,
Badger.
Badger.
And that's, you know, and what I like about these webinars is that we're creating that space for these conversations, you know, to have, you know, because I've said it before, after, you know, just being in as a chief for a couple of years, that I probably wouldn't have said yes to that agreement if I knew what was going to happen shortly after. Right, because I feel that, you know, there was we were misled on some of it, especially with LaJoy and the drawdown, and actually what that meant, because nobody talked about having to go and replace all these generators and what the replacements of these generators was going to do, and how hydro wasn't going to be able to manage water, how outages were going to happen, all of the work that had to be done on the land. That I don't ever recall that being brought to a community meeting to talk about this. And so again, when we're in negotiations, we need to bring in more people, not just the archaeologist and the fish biologist, because really that's who we had sitting in a room, and, you know, 6 lawyers. Right, so it's just how we go with this one, though. How do we develop and make sure that the process of even these upgrades, because, you know, these are facilities that at some point should have an end of life. And, you know, even saying in Shekelwash, we have a dam, you know, Walden. And I'd rather that be taken down and we have fish for 2,000 years than power for 20 years. And that's kind of how we have to look at these facilities as well, is that at some point they just need to come down. You know, the water's just going to go back to what it used to be. Right, but they've got to look at, I understand that, you know, you can't just blow them up, because, you know, people down in Chilliwack might not be too happy, but how do we plan for this? We should be able to sit with people and go, okay, what would it look like if we took Seton Dam down? You know, is that the first one you take down, or should it be Terzaghi? Should that be the first one? Or do you reduce LaJoy and only bring it up to a certain height? Because it's only been operating at that height for what, 10 years? They haven't been able to draw it up. So even though LaJoy is being, you know, is drawn down, so when they draw it down, then there's water constantly having to be released from there because they're not at full height. Mm-hmm. And so all these things are going on out there, and we have all these people sitting around, and especially the LTWIG, and it's the LaJoy Technical Working Group, really looking at, well, what is the difference we're going to be able to make? And, you know, I think there is differences that we're making. You know, like Sue was saying that, you know, the less drawdowns, the better. Well, shouldn't be, you know, we should actually be at no drawdowns because we're doing work. You know, we're going out there, we're talking about mitigation, monitoring, let's do some restoration. And then, you know, you come down and you draw down. And then you have to go back and restart that work over again. So it's really hard to say, you know, let them build it up. You know, do you give them, I would give them an end of life. You know, the dams in this territory are done in like 2070. Then you're done, you know. Then you've got to go. Then we're going to bring back our land. And those are the things that, you know, we have to, like I would say, if you want to inform chiefs, you need to give them all of these facts. And, you know, so it happens we're meeting them this afternoon. So LTWIG can actually update them on some of these accommodation and access sites. And, you know, so they need that really good information going ahead of them, because at the end of the day, this hydro agreement states that they have to get the approval of the Statlium Chiefs Council. So they have to be informed, and they say it in all their presentations that we're looking for your support. We're looking for your support. If they don't have their support, then hydro shouldn't be moving forward. And that's what our agreement states. And we have to make sure that's very strongly understood. And it is by BC Hydro, because it states right in there that they need the support of the Statlium Chiefs Council. But I think that's the one thing we have to see. Did they put a little mechanism in there where they can get around that? And sometimes it's that 2-week notification process, you know, because I was on the shitty end of the stick of one of those where they said, oh, we're going to go replace 96 poles in the corridor. Yeah. And this is your 2-week notification. And, you know, we challenged them, said, you're not going and just replacing, you know, those poles. But that was the understanding by Hydro, that that's all they had to do. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to have a very informed technical team as well that knows our agreement and understands when they can push back, knows the support that they have from the chief, so that they know when they can push back. And that's what we're trying to build here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Well, thank you, everyone. We've got a few minutes left here. Appreciate everyone participating in the conversation. Really, really wonderful. Just going to zoom out here. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? Whoa. Okay, use that pencil really quick. I think I have a few. That's all right. I just was going to add a few more names for those of you who joined us a little bit later. And it's good to see our environment team on there as well. Lois.
Hello, Lois.
And Steve. And
hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining, Lois.
Yes. Let's see if I'm missing anyone else for the draw here.
Michelle, you mentioned earlier about pesticide being used to help grow trees. But the pesticide, would that not endanger animals and insects?
It's fertilizer is what you meant. Yeah. And yes, the answer actually what happened up north is the forestry went in and sprayed a bunch of trees and it killed cows. A whole bunch of cows died as a result of them having sprayed the trees. It's a big stink.
Three or 4 years ago, I think you sold sheep potentially at the time. Closer to home is they wanted to dump 1 million pounds of fertilizer, the dumping corridor into those replanted cut blocks in grizzly bear habitat. And I wrote the letter after consulting, and we developed like all the cultural aspect and put in the biological stuff. It was like a 12-page letter saying no. And they didn't do it. We actually stopped it from happening.
But that same process happened further north and it killed the cows.
Yeah, but any fertilizer that is made by government, sorry, but it's all chemicals.
Yeah, so if it was dropped into the water, and that was our main argument, they were going to dump it from airplane. And it's non-selective. They would have dumped it into the waterways, into everywhere. The plants that animals eat. It would have killed aquatic life as well as terrestrial life.
And then the other problem is that fertilizer's targeted to trees, but you're dumping it from an airplane. So now you're hitting all the berry bushes. Well, if you over fertilize a berry bush, you get lots of leaves and no berries. Right? Like
Well,
so
we're
the
also ingesting that.
ramifications are
And that's 60-year-old vegetation out there. It's not new cool cuts that they're targeting, right? They want to go into
grow
stands. And again, it goes back to the benefit of having, professionals working for us, because you can go and ask them about the science and say, this is how it's going to interfere with our culture and our way of life. And they give us that feedback. It was, got to go to, Jackie Rasmussen as well, who, is she's an agrologist. So it's good to have some
but moving naturally, like I know if you put like Epsom salt in water and spray your ground, it doesn't harm anything, but it also grows your grass faster. So what's the difference between going more natural than having some people making fertilizer?
That's just people out there. That's, probably a couple of rich people sitting around talking about how they can make more money off of, resources, but it's like, just let the trees grow.
It's
right?
an
It's not like
economic
they're
argument, not an environment.
It's not like they're going to grow any quicker. You're never going to see it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is like, is this even legit? Because where's the study on that?
Exactly.
And measure the
Exactly.
tree.
Right.
After
that was in the 12-page letter.
Where's the evidence?
Produce faster growing trees for your economic value.
Well, which one of these people that sat around watched the tree grow?
Right? Like, how do you know?
The circle of dumb and hey, that sounds like a good idea. And you know there without even like thinking about it, right?
And it's being able to have that capacity to respond, because a lot of people will just, hope that nobody responds to their referral, right? That they don't get back to them. So you've got to figure out, how do we stay on top of these so that we know and we can respond.
Yeah, because those ones are 30 days to respond, which is no time, especially if he doesn't have capacity. All these things are building up on the side of the desk. That could have been easily missed. In 30 days, and then they're doing it because they consider 30 days for.
Well, this thing here, if it wasn't for Michelle's name being even mentioned, I would have not known about this.
Exactly.
Like, it was just like, holy crap. And then when I talked to my administrator, because I was like, hey, I want to attend this. And she was just like, oh, what is this?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so she wanted lands coming in. And then I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, we're talking about split rock. So where's lands from there? Where's environmental from there? Like, where's everybody else that, like, is anybody else aware of any of this?
That's why I was looking at Vanessa, that's why these opportunities to do these seminars are so important, right? And it has been recorded, so it will be available for people to be able to at least see this part of it again.
And maybe this is a need for part 2, and those that weren't brought on, let's find a way of like getting better with our communications. So that we can get the word out better. So that we can have these discussions, because they are so very critical actually to the SCC being able to advocate on behalf of everyone. So again, I appreciate everyone, and if everyone would like a part 2, I think that that's definitely something. Let's be in touch and then figure out a date, and let's figure out who else needs to be at the table for these discussions, because I think that for a lot of people it was an eye-opening discussion, at least for me as well. Thanks, Ellie. Thanks for jumping on for this. And yeah, let's have a part 2 for this, because I think that's really important. So again, we're gonna just do a little draw. We're kind of running out of time here, so Michelle would like to pick a name.
Well, we used the 2 hours again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
did the whole time.
Lois, I think it's like the 3rd time I've picked you.
Awesome. Thank you. I like my name being picked.
Yeah.
Get our picture all ready.
Yeah, you want another bag from the
Oh,
Saskatchewan
nice.
Government Services. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Awesome.
be in touch for
Thank you.
yeah.
Unless
Yeah,
Jessica could take it.
Sorry?
She could take
Lois
it to the
just wanted the
office
bag.
for
She
me.
just wondered if you could bring it to the office.
Yes, I will deliver it for you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Have a
Again,
good
Thank you,
afternoon.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Good afternoon.